Hello. I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about where we are in our course population studies. We're in the international level of consideration of social demographic themes, the formal demographic responses to social demographic features of society. I have as the illustration out there, as you've seen on the Excel spreadsheet, which is a spreadsheet that you will use as you do assignment 1. There are two spreadsheets out there right now. One is Excel spreadsheet for fertility and one is Excel spreadsheet for mortality. Both of them are comparisons of the United States and Afghanistan, and all you will need to do is take comparable data and plug them in where I have Afghanistan. Plug in your country of interest, and the transformations will occur on the spreadsheet because the formula are embedded, and you'll get your charts and your population pyramids and things like that. So get started on that, and so that if you have any glitch or something begins to happen, we can talk about it. You can email me, or I can do some clarifications to everybody via email. We're social demographers. We have an equation. We have formal demographic outcomes, things that we measure by, events that we measure by formal demographic methods of like total fertility rate and mortality rates and things like that. And we're interested in that. We're interested in the variation, why it's different, say, between the United States and Afghanistan. And then as social demographers, we want to go kind of upstream, shall we say, to the context of the United States and the context of Afghanistan, and see if we can determine anything there or see anything there in the context that might explain why Afghanistan's fertility or mortality is one way and the United States fertility and mortality is another way. Remember, using that demographic transition model, which I have posted out there, that image that shows mortality dropping sooner than fertility, and mortality perhaps more responsive to contextual things like sanitation happening, whereas fertility is more individual, the calculus of choice, as Cole talks about in the readings for fertility, people making decisions on how many children they want to have, and that maybe the context catch-ups with them at some point where they might have needed larger children, higher fertility in a rural area, agricultural area, where the wealth goes from children into the family, and children working in the fields, to a more modern perspective where wealth goes from family to children, as in formalized education. And then those calculus of choices about making decisions, how many children do we want to have, how do we want to space them, and that sort of thing, and the use of contraceptives. In these exercises, looking at the mortality transition, but the way we're doing the transitions is really, we're not taking Afghanistan or your country of choice, or the United States for that matter, and looking at the transition of fertility over time in the United States or in Afghanistan, your country of choice, or mortality in the United States or at the international level, or your country of choice or Afghanistan. Actually, what we're saying here is that Afghanistan and the United States themselves represent the transition. In other words, Afghanistan is the high transition of fertility. The United States is to the low transition. Early in the demographic transition, Afghanistan; later in the demographic transition, United States, or your country of choice would be comparable to Afghanistan. And the same thing with mortality. Afghanistan has a higher mortality, and then the transition is, we can envision the transition by looking at the United States and seeing at a later stage in the demographic transition. Already, it would have had a mortality like that, but we're not going back in time and looking. We're using our countries of comparison to kind of get the images of those concepts of those transitions in front of us. And again, as social demographers, we are looking for context to explain why the U.S. mortality is different than the Afghan mortality, and the U.S. fertility is different than the Afghan fertility. All the data that you will need for both these transitions, both the United States and Afghanistan, the United States and your country of choice, are on the international database of the U.S. Census. It's all out there on that database. So, now when it comes to taking a look at the social demographic piece of it, there you will want to take a look at those readings. Take a look at Cole. What's Cole talk about? When does the calculation of choice become more operational in terms of choosing how many children and the frequency and that sort of thing. The Mosley and Chin article in Mortality, what are the contextual things that are happening that are influencing child mortality? Things perhaps as obvious as sanitation and things like that I've talked about that was in my dissertation some years ago. I have in both these articles, prof notes rather, that are posted now, some summary of the readings in fertility and a summary of readings in mortality, kind of help you speed you up. They're not complete, so be sure and, what I would do with those articles, both in fertility and mortality, is scan them. That'll mean, take a look at them, kind of thumb through them, look at the abstract, look at the opening lines, what are they trying to do, look at the conclusions, what did they conclude, and kind of look in the between, all that sort of thing. I wouldn't say you have to read those articles word for word, but you might want to read some of them word for word. I leave that to you. They are your resource along with Weeks for writing the text piece of the essay that describes the transition that you see between the U.S. and your country of choice, both in fertility and in mortality. The other one that might be of interest in the fertility one is the natural fertility, because when you do the age-specific fertility rates for the U.S. and for your country, you'll see that the shapes are very different. The Afghan shape is more humped, shall we say, whereas the U.S. shape is more flat. And natural fertility, that means that fertility in Afghanistan is growing. It's much higher, and there's no, shall we say, contraception. There's no even cultural mechanism for, shall we say, for changing fertility patterns. So children are born as, shall we say, as often as they can be born to a woman. So you have higher total fertility rates on average. So there's some images there that are interesting. And of course, the other image that comes out of the mortality side of it on the mortality spreadsheet is the pyramid. Remember, we were saying last time the population pyramid is another image of the demographic transition model. If you compare the base of the pyramid of U.S. with the base of the pyramid in Afghanistan, the Afghanistan pyramid is much wider, and that's because a higher proportion of that population is younger than and fertility is higher than the United States. And then when you look at the shape of the pyramid, you'll notice that the Afghani pyramid is more pyramidal shaped, more pronounced, that if everybody who was born, remember, lived to say 100, it'd be a rectangle. So the mortality experience of the population is reflected in the shape of the pyramid. The more steep the pyramid, the more pronounced is the mortality experience. The more heavy, shall we say, is a lot more deaths happening in Afghanistan. Then when you look at the U.S., it's more rectangular. It's not quite, but it's like that. You can see how it's beginning to happen. And I think one of the illustrations I showed you last time was Mexico, and Mexico somewhere in between Afghanistan and the United States. So there are some interesting images that help encapsulate in an image what we're doing. The transition model, population pyramids, the slope of the fertility curve, natural fertility curve in the fertility readings. So I think, just to encourage you, keep going. The assignment is due October the 3rd. Both Excel spreadsheets are posted, one for fertility, one for mortality. I've got the notes posted, so I think we're okay. I'll do another video towards the end of next week. October 1st will be getting close, and kind of summarizing where we are on this international level. The next level, we go to the national level. We compare internally the United States and look at the same issues, transition issues, but look at them perhaps by race and ethnicity. I think it'd be a good way to do that. So, seems like everything's going well. I hope it is. I haven't heard anything from you in the way of emails and all, like you're in a stump. Stay in the discussion. It's important. I'm going up there in a little while. And y'all be safe out there, and talk to you.